See if we can get this going. So welcome everyone to the, what is it, the April?
Yep.
May? No, April?
Yep.
April card meeting. I'm Roger Rayle, Chair of CARD and Chair of Scio Residents for Safe Water, and I'm in my 29th year watching over this as a citizen volunteer, watching over the Paul Gelman Danaher 1,4-dioxane contamination. So I'm going to let Beth go over the first. Let me share the agenda here before I get too far down the line. Share screen. I think this one will work. Is everybody seeing the agenda?
Yep.
So Beth, if you want to take care of
the card minutes from last month, the board has had a chance to look at, and then you guys can as well on that link. Do I have a motion to approve the March minutes?
So moved. Support.
Okay, and all in favor?
Aye.
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 Good.
Thanks, Beth. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. You're welcome.
Good job.
Thank you.
And before I turn it over to Jack, I want to point out the disclaimer that we're recording this meeting. If there's some issue that you really don't want it recorded, we can turn it off and turn it back on, or we can clip it out later, because the video will be posted on YouTube for general distribution. And what I'd like people to do is stay muted unless you have something to say, so we don't get too much background noise. You can raise your hand on screen if you have a screen, or you can use the raise hand symbol on Zoom. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Jack, our executive director, and he will take us through the rest of the meeting. Meanwhile, I'm going to go off screen because I haven't finished my dinner yet, so you don't have to watch me eat. I'll be here.
All right. Thank you, Roger. So we're going to start on the agenda at old business. We've realized that there isn't going to be a removal of the confidentiality agreement anytime soon, but EGLE has formally asked for the information that we haven't been able to get because of the confidentiality agreement. And so, Dan, is there an update on the status of that information request?
Well, as you know, we sent, as I've confirmed, we've sent two letters, two requests for information letters, one in December last year and one in February. And we got a response back. The February was a letter to Gelman. It was identified as a request for information violation notice letter. So Gelman did respond to the letter, sent us a letter from their legal counsel, and identified that they were not going to fulfill the specific request for the reason. They gave specific reasons. One of them was the confidentiality agreement. Some of the other information we asked for, we identified was outside that. They identified that that's also was that information was generated under from Danaher hiring and gathering that information, and it's in the under legal protection related to the Danaher gathering that information. So we got a response letter. And then we discussed in-house what the next steps would be. And Brian wanted me to, point out this evening as an update. Normally, the next steps we would bring would be kind of go to circuit court under Part 201, Section 201.17, to compel the compliance with the information requests. But he has informed me the Michigan court rule bars the current court from amending its orders after the leave to appeal was granted. So basically, we're kind of stuck a little bit because of the because of the appeal process, the leave to appeal. Again, I'm trying to summarize this with my notes, so I may not have the descriptions exact, but because of that, the court basically can't amend its orders, or i.e. Take away the confidentiality agreement. The court is unable to reverse or lift the confidentiality order currently to require disclosure of the data. So what he wanted me to identify and communicate is that we're kind of in a little bit of limbo because of the appeal process. And that's the update for this evening.
So if I may, before I call on Ralph, it was my impression from our previous discussions that you were seeking this information in a wholly separate process from the court proceedings regarding the order and the confidentiality order.
Right, we were seeking additional information, right.
And so it seems to me that the appeal of that court order doesn't bar the court from addressing the completely independent authority that EGLE has to seek information regarding the site. I'm really disappointed in the Attorney General, I guess is what I'm going to say. Go ahead, Ralph.
I guess I would say that I would echo what you just said, and I would also say that the confidentiality order is not what was appealed. And so I don't think that has anything to do with it. And I think that's a disingenuous response. And this is just another example of Gelman comes up with some argument and you just go, oh, well, let it go. That you should be in their grill saying you're full of it.
And that's to express disappointment with the Attorney General's office, not EGLE itself.
Yeah, correct.
And I agree with that. Is there any further comment on this item? I'm going to move on to the next item.
Yeah, no, I would say that Brian Nagel has not been very supportive over the years, and he seems to side with the Gelman more often than not. And it's unfortunate, and people have said the same thing that I've said. So
Thank you.
the way it is. Thanks.
Don't forget to use the little technology raising of your hand so I know who wants to speak next. On to the next item, 3B, the update on the MS4 violation. I imagine that almost everybody here has seen the March 24th letter from EGLE stating that they tend to, I'm sorry, that's a different matter entirely. Is there anybody that has information on the MS4 violation and whether it's superseded by the court's order?
Well, I can only identify that the original a work plan, an MS4, what I'll call an MS4 work plan, was submitted to EGLE back in September 2021. It went through a review process. It really was submitted directly to Evan Pratt, who is the permit holder, MS4 permit holder. And then he asked EGLE, w.r.t and r.r.t to comment on it. And so we made comments, he made comments and submitted it back, the response back to Gelman. And in that response, it was requested that they revise the work plan based upon the comments and resubmit. So what has occurred is that in February, Gelman resubmitted submitted a work plan back to us, but they submitted the work plan as a work plan for down gradient and Allen Drain GSI investigations. So they basically and then identified to Evan that this work plan, is what they're going to say, what they are sending in response to his request for a revised work plan. So it came to me direct as opposed to Evan. EGLE, as GSI work plans usually do, go to the district level. So it came to me, and then I started it in the process of evaluating it related to GSI, basically a review of a GSI work plan. That evaluation includes a district review of it, but also it includes what we call a TAPS team, which is a technical group on specific exposure pathways, the GSI exposure pathway. So there's a GSI TAPS team, and it's made up of the experts and from all the districts in EGLE. And we review that. They have periodic meetings, these TAPS team. And so I brought it to the TAPS team, and we are doing a TAPS team review of that Allen Drain GSI work plan tomorrow. And so we will go, like I said, we're going down the path of reviewing it as a GSI work plan because it came in that way and was requested to be reviewed. So that is going to occur tomorrow. Now, the identification of the relationship, what I'll call more of a policy relation, the change or the evaluation of, is it an MS4 issue or is it a GSI issue, and has not been finalized. Again, I'm fulfilling the request at the district level to do the review the work plan as it strictly as GSI. So after that's done, then we will get the EGLE Gelman team, including the AG, for review of the rules and regulations as they relate to Part 201 and Part 31, which is the MS4, where the MS4 violation would come out of.
Just so that I can understand this, the MS4 permit belongs to the county drain commissioner, Evan Pratt. And so if he disagrees with the idea, with the polluter's idea that this is superseded by the Part 201 orders, he himself would have to seek enforcement of that position. Is that correct?
That is how I understand it. It would, the enforcement would be started with Evan, the permit holder, Washtenaw County.
Okay.
And EGLE does assist that way, but it is because it's an MS4, and he is that is who is required to eliminate the illicit discharge, the MS4 violation.
But EGLE hasn't taken an official position on whether or not it's superseded by your work.
Right. We haven't done a response saying that way. What we have discussed in-house is that we're going to take it down to GSI because the request came in that way. And then our response, an evaluation is strictly related to the Allen Drain GSI. And most likely we will then identify there's still maybe obligations of under Part 31, the MS4 program that Gelman may still have. But that response has not been finalized. We're going to get it through the our GSI evaluation.
Thank you. Go ahead, Beth.
Yes, I'd like to know though, at 280, which I think is extremely high and should not be allowed in our Allen Creek drain. But at that number, what's going to happen when these higher concentrations from Maple Road make it in there and go over 280? Then what? Oops.
Well, the 280 is also the GSI criteria. So what that means is if it goes over that, and then they are going to have to eliminate that venting to surface water at that concentration, which is above 280.
So why wouldn't we make them do that now? Like
Because they're
clean
not
up the dioxane.
because they're not required to do that now. That's the whole idea about a criteria. If it remains below that, there's really no, under the law, there is really no exposure pathway that until it's above 280. So making them is, we aren't required to make them. We can't make them do that. Just similar to the groundwater drinking water criteria of 7.2, making them do something at concentrations lower than 7.2. We can't really do that. So as we've stated before, this is the very similar under the GSI exposure pathway. The 280 is the criteria.
Thank you. Go ahead, Vince.
Oh, thanks. So when this Gelman effort to put 1,4-dioxane into the sanitary sewer and stormwater, they were denied by the drain office, which is now the Water Resources Commissioner's office, as well as the City of Ann Arbor. They wrote specific regulations restricting the effluent being, using the sewer system or the stormwater system as a conduit to the river. And the other issue I have here is we don't really have very meaningful tests to determine that people aren't being exposed. There's very minimal testing being done. There could be homes exposed and we don't even know it, because we're already at 49 as a high number at West Park, and very few tests are being done. So people could be getting this in their basement now. It's not potentially dangerous, but it's not that far from what some people consider a dangerous number would be 100. So does EGLE supersede the county and the city's regulations on using Allen's Creek?
I'm not sure I understand the question, Vince. When you mean supersedes out, we have a criteria under Part 201, the regulations.
What if it violates the city and the county's rule?
Again, we handle the state rule. The city or county has that violation. I'm sure we would assist in whatever way we can.
They definitely have it. They've had it for a long time.
Well, we don't run that program. That would be a city or a county violation and
so the city or county or the city and the county could then challenge this.
Yeah, we just got
they could challenge this, yes, but they would be it would be a direct. It would be their challenging it with Gelman.
Well, what about, doesn't EGLE regulate this?
I'm not. EGLE regulates the groundwater surface water interface exposure pathway. That's what I'm talking about, is venting, groundwater venting to surface waters. And yes, we regulate that. And that's what I'm talking about. The criteria for that is 280. And so I'm not quite sure what you mean, does EGLE regulate?
What goes into the Allen's Creek from Gelman?
No, well, no, other than the GSI exposure pathway.
All right, well, we have to, maybe CARD should petition our county and city.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Ralph.
I'm extremely confused, and I guess I'll share a bit of what Vince was talking about. I'll try to ask the question a different way. Maybe it'll get to the same point, but I'll try to get at least illuminate it from my own perspective. And it seems to me that what you're saying, Dan, and forgive me for being ignorant here, but I'm trying to understand this, is that if there's no MS4 violation, then the state regulates it under this GSI work plan, and the criteria is 280. Do I have that right so far?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
so let me.
That's the exposure pathway that I would regulate.
Okay, and on the other hand, if there is if the Part 201 doesn't somehow trump or override the MS4 violation, what you just said, I think, is that EGLE doesn't have any responsibility to enforce the MS4 violation? Is that what you're saying?
Well, EGLE assists the permit holder in enforcing that MS4 violation.
Okay. And how would that assist? Let's assume for a moment that Part 201 does not trump MS4, okay? Would you then be squawking at Gelman now and saying, well, we don't really care about this GSI 280 because you're violating MS4 and we have to deal with that? Am I?
Well, again, with Evan, if that, what you just described, we would be helping Evan do that. Evan Pratt, the Washington County.
Is it your point then that it's Evan's decision? And if he says, I don't, or he or the county council says, I don't agree with Gelman's interpretation of the juxtaposition of Part 201 and Part 31, that you would join him in court and say MS4 has to be, there's a violation here and we're seeking in court to stop that violation, and the court order doesn't matter because this is a whole separate thing under MS4. Am I right?
Your logic, I understand your logic. Are you right? I'm not gonna, I'm not a legal, but
I understand that. I'm not pushing you for a legal interpretation. What don't get me wrong there. I understand your reluctance there. My point is that if Evan, and I don't know what your own counsel is telling you or what they're going to do, but what the Attorney General's office is going to do, but let's assume the county says we don't agree with Gelman about that point and we want to proceed on this violation. Doesn't your counsel then have to decide, well, okay, it's our obligation to assist here? Are you going to oppose it and side with Gelman? Aren't we entitled to know that?
Well, that's where the situation is now. You're talking whether 201 trumps Part 31. Basically, the rules for Part 201 and Part 31, and I'm just doing a summary here. Basically it's saying, notwithstanding any other provision of this part, remedial actions that satisfy the requirements of Part 201. The requirements of Part 201 would be the GSI requirements.
I understand that. And
okay, what it does is satisfies the person's remedial obligations under Part 31. And that would have to be decided by EGLE that, which is that the correct is that how we're interpreting that? My
point is this. This is a thorny issue. I know there are people, I talked to at least one person who's a card member who thinks the Attorney General's interpretation is, I'll use a polite term, completely wrong. And so what I want to know, without, I have no particular environmental law background, but I can read a statute if somebody gives me the materials. And so what I would like from EGLE is to be supplied with whatever Gelman showed you that indicates what their position is and what it's based on. And then I would like to see the Attorney General's analysis of that, because that's their job. And we would like to know what, I understand the issue about privilege, and you might want to not show if it's an interpretation that agrees with Gelman, you might not want to air that in public. I get that, but somebody should be analyzing that and telling us, at least giving us the background so we can fence with the county council, who you say it's their call really, whether to fuss or not, so that we can analyze this so we don't have to do the work ourselves, because frankly, that's your job. And we would like to be supplied with that information. So I would appreciate it if you could ask Mr. Nagel or Dana Nessel or whoever the heck you have to ask to provide us with that information so we're not thrashing around in the dark.
I make a clarifying answer here. about
Go ahead.
Evan Pratt, what he has said in the recent past about his lawyers and what they have said? That he contacted the county lawyers and the state lawyers, and they instructed him that he should not push for MS4 until they work something out, basically. So he talked to the county lawyers and the state lawyers, and that was his impression from them. That was a previous meeting we had maybe 2 or 3 months ago. So it's in the minutes too, I think. So
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Go ahead, Rita.
This is just another way to say that we are talking about this over and over and over again without clarification. So I think that Ralph outlined a good approach and asked that we proceed at least that way, because I find it very difficult to understand and very uncomfortable to know that we still know that there is some dioxin in that storm drain. Thanks, that's it.
So I want to follow up with a question, just for clarification. When the MS4 permit was issued, there was a consent judgment in place with these standards, wasn't there? Dan?
I don't have the specifics of when the last one was
Okay.
done. Yes, but a consent judgment has been in place, since the early 90s. Now, whether it covered specific language, had specific language related to venting of groundwater, I don't think the early ones did. But yes, that there has been consent judgment in place since the last MS4 permit was it was probably renewed in this situation.
All right, thank you so much. Seeing no further hands, I'm going to move on to the next item. An update on the city water, the City of Ann Arbor's wet basement testing. Patty, do you have anything to report?
Just that we have had no requests for sampling this quarter, or this month rather, since last month.
All right. Any other comment on this item? I'm gonna move along then. Do you have anything to report on the Sentinel wall program?
Yes, so we are making some progress. There is a video that will be available. It's not been recorded yet, an informational video, but once I have it, it will be distributed to CARD as well as the public at large. Been working on getting a RFP together for contracting drillers. So that will probably be out in the next couple of weeks. We're targeting July, probably mid-July for drilling those Sentinel wells.
Thank you, that's great.
Begin drilling. It will take some time. I should clarify. It'll take a couple of months to install those.
But that's when July is likely when it will start.
Yes, that's
Okay.
what we're targeting. Absolutely.
Thank you. Go ahead, Vince.
but do you have a map of where those wells will be at this point?
I do, but it's not available yet. It will,
Okay,
once
so
it's distributed in the video, I can share it, but I can't until then.
Can you share it with us when you do?
But I
Have it
can tell
available?
you, it's at that Miller Maple Road intersection that was in the last presentation that I gave and we did the model. That's that area we were targeting.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Mhm. Yep.
Can you remind me of how many wells are proposed?
So it has to go to council, but we are proposing two nested wells. So we'll do exploratory boreholes, figure out what we see. If there's, vertical aquifer sampling, targeting a shallow and a deep is what we're expecting at 2 different locations. So that's a total of 4 wells.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Seeing no hands, I'm going to move on to the next item. Is there anyone here that can speak about the Superfund site designation? I understand that this is moving slowly, so it wouldn't surprise me if there's no update on this. Go ahead, Vince.
You're muted, Vince.
So yeah, there's reliable source in the federal government that indicate that this is moving along pretty well and should not, it should happen. So I can't say how long it would be, but probably 6-12 months, if not less. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone that can speak to the appeal process from the June 2021 order? At the last meeting, there was some discussion about trying to obtain the briefs and stuff. Kathy Knoll has passed along some things to me. I still have none of the briefs that any of the parties have filed with the Michigan Supreme Court. But Dan, has any of this been posted on the EGLE site?
No, it has not been posted on the EGLE site yet. And whether that we will post everybody's, I'm not sure yet. That's still being discussed.
All right. Go ahead, Rolf. You're mute.
I understand what the answer is, Dan, and I appreciate we're constantly badgering you for stuff, but I find this to be flat unbelievable. These are public documents. We could go to the damn court and get them out of the file ourselves, but we'd have to pay copying charges for this. To deny the constituents that our tax dollars are paying for, to not be able to even read I'm struggling to not curse here. This is flat unbelievable. These are public records. And you have to discuss it internally, whether you'll allow your constituents who are paying you to read the documents that you're representing us with. That's unbelievable. Maybe I should call Mike Caldwell. He's an old friend of mine. He'd probably send them to me. I mean, I find this, I'll be quiet now, but this is unbelievable. I'm going to send a letter to the Attorney General, and I'm going to scream bloody murder.
Thank you, Rolf. Seeing no further hands, I'm going to move on to G, the Scio Township update. Kathy, do you have anything to say today?
Briefly, we have identified the sites for our next round of well testing. So 34 wells have been identified. All of the letters have gone out to residents, and the testing will be done in late April. And this round of well testing will be for homes north of I-94, west of Maple Road, and east of Honey Creek. We'll be using the 522 method. Once we have the results from that round of testing, we will be doing a fourth round of testing sometime in the early summer. We have invited residents to submit a questionnaire stating that they are interested in participating in this next round of well testing. And we're going to try to get a representative sample from different parts of the areas that we're looking at, which is a slightly broadened area geographically from what I just described. So all of this data will be shared with the County Health Department and with EGLE. And of course, this data will be used to advocate for future additional testing from EGLE. That's it. Thank you.
So that's really great news. I just have a question. Is the township absorbing the cost of this all by itself, or is
Yes.
the county and city?
Yes. Scio is paying 100% of these expenses, but this won't go on indefinitely. And our hope is that the county and EGLE in the future will expand some of their testing based on the data that comes from our testing.
Thank you again. Go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, I'll just point out again that I've shared with the consultants doing the testing and with EGLE a spreadsheet that allows the data to be imported in the same manner that Gelman's monthly submittals to EGLE is submitted, so that it would be easy for Dan Hamel to update the database when that spreadsheet is submitted to EGLE. It's a simple spreadsheet. So whatever Dan does to update the database with Gelman's data, he can do with the Scio's data. So I've done my part. It's the ball's in their court now. So I'm hoping that happens sometime. You know, it's been 6 months, and we really don't have that data in the database, and it's not going to be in this round of Google Earth mashups that I've been working on for several weeks now, because we didn't have it in the 2021 database. So that's all.
Well, we appreciate your efforts, even if they aren't prompting others to act. I'm going to move on to H now, and that's Kathy again. Do you have anything to report on the Knights of Columbus development?
No, I don't. Nothing has happened officially. There have been some administrative meetings with our planner and the potential developers. Nothing official has been stated, so I can't really say a lot publicly right now.
We understand. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And Jack, my question perennially to Kathy, over the past couple of meetings, this is not back before any of the governing bodies, your planning commission or the trustees anytime soon. Nothing scheduled.
Nothing is scheduled. I don't know when it would come back to the planning commission, but the developer wants to bring it back to the planning commission. And there has been informal discussion about extending the water line out there. And that's kind of out in the mix right now. I don't know what's happening with that. And I haven't been a part of those discussions.
All righty. Thanks, Kathy. I appreciate it.
Seeing no further hands on this item, we're going to move on to I, which is Ann Arbor's water sourcing.
Eric Lipson's got his hand up.
I don't see. Oh, he's
That's
not.
sorry.
His real hand.
Yeah,
I'm going to miss those, but go ahead, Eric.
I'm sorry. I was just wondering if going back to the depth of the aquifer in that area and how far, where dioxane, how deep it is that it's been located in that proposed subdivision.
I don't know how deep the aquifer is in that area, but I do know that dioxane has been documented in wells very close to the site. But we don't have specifics on a proposed plan yet. We don't know where homes would be or whether it would involve a community well or not. There are so many unknowns and there's so much right now that's hypothetical. So I can't answer anything more.
Okay.
If we were in charge, we'd just go out there and put some monitoring walls. But we're
Well,
not. So
you can the homeowners will know how deep their wells are.
Yes, and I do know, I'm just looking at the people participating in this meeting, and I do see a resident who lives close to the site. If she wants to raise her hand and state how deep her well is, she can. But I don't know personally the well depths in that area. There's a record of it. We have records of it. So I just don't have that information with
That's
me
cool.
right now.
I just thought you might, if you had it handy. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Didn't mean to
Vince.
put you on the spot.
So one of the big concerns here is that if these wells go in, is it going to pull the plume farther into the northern area? So that's a
Right.
major concern that they're not sure about, and they're trying to look into that. And I think that is something that the neighbors are concerned about who already live there and already have
Yes.
wells. So it's kind of complicated.
Yes.
Okay, seeing no other hands. Let's move on to I, Ann Arbor water sourcing. Beth, did you?
Oh, Jack, Margaret Engel just raised her hand.
Oh, go ahead, Margaret.
Hi, I live across the street from the Knights of Columbus site, and our well is 164 feet.
Okay.
And I actually have been following, something seems to be happening over there in the last week or so. There were a lot of trucks on the site last Thursday, and the for sale sign either fell down or it was pulled down. And I've spoken with a couple of people at Township Hall in the last week. They don't know much more about what's happening, but there is the discussion about bringing in the piped well under, or piped water under 94, which they think is going to cost about $800,000, but they're still talking about putting a sewer system on there. So that's all I know.
Thank you so much. Go ahead, Beth.
Well, I do know that I think part of the planning commission last time was they wanted to do or requiring geological studies. And so that's probably who's out there now is looking and figuring out if they should do that community well, because then you're talking not sucking it for individual homes, but one large one as far as and that seems even worse to be pulling from, in my opinion, and I'm not a geologist in any way, but yeah, that they shouldn't just dismiss the dioxane over development parcels in this area. And I've been talking about that for years because of what happened over here, something even different where it was going to be stormwater pushing high concentrations and very high concentrations, like the hot spots. So, and it was dismissed, oh, we can't stop development for that. And I mean, yeah, dismiss it now and pay for it years from now. That's all I have to say.
Well, I think that the township is better on this kind of issue than, say, oh, I don't know, the city. And that's why there is some rumors about running a city water pipe out that direction, which is a whole different set of complications that we're not going to get into. Go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, I just point out again that if they're going to have an on-site water system there should be a provisional wellhead protection area designated for that well. And in my estimation, that would extend back into the Gelman area and make that kind of new well impossible. So that's about it.
Righty. Once again, I'm going to try to move on to the next agenda item. Beth, did you want to speak to this?
I wonder if there's anyone more elected or appointed that would like to, because this was on the agenda for a while. I thought it was resolved, so I pulled it. And evidently I shouldn't be pulling it. You guys have gotten the emails the last couple of days in the card core group. So it's concerning to me because I think our water system in Ann Arbor is doing a wonderful job at everything, including planning for the future and upgrading our systems. And this just is very disturbing because it's not sustainable. And I don't know where EGLE came off with this letter, but I'm not as intelligent as some of you to speak on it. So if anyone, oh, good, we have a council member.
Go ahead, Kathy.
I've reviewed the letter. I've read Dan Bicknell's explanations. And I do have a meeting scheduled with Mr. Dahoney, our city administrator, on Thursday afternoon to give him a short update. And the subject title was The Politics of Water, just to give you a hint. I really think that this is more a political move than anything, and I'm troubled by it. But I'd like to be proven wrong if there's something else going on.
Kathy, a political move by whom?
I'm not sure who is initiating this. I mean, we saw the letter that was initiated by the EGLE office in Warren, Michigan. We've seen news articles showing that there are some cash flow issues with Great Lakes Water Authority and litigation with Highland Park. But I'm really new to this topic, and so I don't know. And I see Patty has her hand up, so maybe she knows more than I do.
So let's go to Patty.
I don't really know more, but I will say I had a meeting with Mr. Steglitz this morning, and he wanted me to pass on that he has received the letter. He's reviewed it. He's working on a response. I believe he also has a meeting with the administrator. He shared that as well.
Okay.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, I also want to state that we passed approval to go out for bonds last night at the city council meeting, as well as I believe some engineering contracts for design work. So I would hate to see us put this on hold. I'm also told, I haven't seen anything in writing, that Congresswoman Debbie Dingell is working on getting some federal funds for some of this infrastructure at the water treatment plant. So the pieces are just sort of coming together. I feel like I was blindsided by this, and I'm thankful that Dan Bicknell brought it to our attention.
All righty. I'm going to move to Vince now, and everybody else can put your hand down.
So Rita Locke Caruso and Dan Bicknell did a presentation 2 months ago, I think. So it's on YouTube if people want to watch it. It was very informative, and it seemed to have a definite effect, indicating that the Detroit water was not very good, especially from where they're getting it. They have several, I think they have 2 intakes, and the one that we would get would be particularly bad. So you can watch that if you want. There's a lot of good information in that, and they did a good job. Appreciate that. Thanks.
We need to put that link in the chat so Beth will have it.
Okay. Anything more on the Ann Arbor's water source? Seeing no hands, I'm going to move on to the EGLE update. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, as far as the response activity order implementation progress, I have, as I confirmed last time, there have been 5 locations that have been monitoring well clusters have been installed in the western area, and then 1 location in the eastern area. Current status is there in the order. There are 7 more locations for monitoring wells in the eastern area within the prohibition zone. Gelman does have access to one of the locations on a private property, and that's in near the Montgomery well, where the Montgomery well is. The other locations are the northern PZ boundary wells, and then the 3 locations near the West Park area. They are pursuing access with the city right away access. They have submitted all the information related to a license agreement with the city. I believe they have some license agreement. They were modifying that, and the city has not completed, as I understand, not completed a final review of that. As soon as that access is identified, they will mobilize and start moving, as they did in the eastern area, to each of the locations. those 7 locations within the prohibition zone and complete the installation of monitoring wells required under the response activity order. They also have, as I've confirmed in the past, they've also done some test borings for the Rosewell remediation area to finalize a extraction well for that location. They've done some preliminary infrastructure updating there to connect that well to the infrastructure to be able to be sent back across and treated at the current Gelman facility on Wagner. As far as other locations, where there's 2 other locations, they are in the eastern area. They are having trouble acquiring access from private parties, property owners, and that has slowed them down in installation at the locations of I and J. They are pursuing that through their legal, talking to the private property legal, and but they have not reconciled the access location requests. They have not been granted access for those locations. If that goes on for a little further, we will take a look at what options are, potentially moving the wells. Again, these locations are based upon the response activity order, which was which identified, the order identified that the proposed 4th amended CJ work be implemented by Gelman, and in that proposed 4th amended CJ, that's where these locations were identified. And again, the locations were a compromise during the negotiations for that document. They will also then, as I've stated, in the GSI, there's a GSI work plan that we will do final review here. GSI TAPS team meeting is tomorrow, and then once given, identify either approval with conditions, or give them some instruction, they will implement that GSI investigation in the eastern area along Allen Drain. They also have a western area GSI work plan that we reviewed and gave them comments on, and they've resubmitted a revised work plan. We have reviewed that, and I'm generating a response back for that revised work plan. I anticipate that work will continue, will start here sometime here in early summer in the western area GSI. Gelman, in relationship to that, Gelman has submitted to EGLE a wetlands permit request, and I'm working with our w.r.t division for the wetlands permit. That wetlands permit is related to the work that's going to go on in related to the GSI in the marshy area along the unnamed tributary and adjacent to Third Sister Lake. Those work plans have been posted on the webpage. So as you know, they have been previously posted, so they are available there.
Thank you.
Let's see.
We have a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know who, somebody can maybe answer this question for me. You mentioned the Montgomery well, Dan, and my recollection is the Montgomery well was formerly the city's a city water intake well that was shut down when a small amount of dioxin was discovered in it.
I just mentioned that for just the general area. People are very familiar where that well is and was.
Yeah, could somebody tell me how that's trending? As far as the dioxin levels have gone? Or is there a place I can go and look?
The city, I believe, the city samples the Montgomery well or an adjacent monitoring well for that. I don't have month-to-month data on that, so I can't tell you what the latest data was at the Montgomery well. I was just referencing it as a location, so people have an idea where we are, or Gelman is required to install a monitoring well cluster near the Montgomery well area.
I get it. My question was also a little off topic, but you sparked my interest at that, so.
No problem.
Go ahead, Roger.
I think you're muted, Roger.
Got a couple things. So Dan, everybody can see Google Earth mesh up here that I have. This is the original 4th conceptual proposal with the locations for monitoring. Were these the locations that they're having trouble getting? These bigger ones here down near the southern boundary of the prohibition zone? Were those the locations?
No, that location you just had your hand on there, your pointer. That's the Montgomery well area, general area, what I was talking about. The ones that they are having access problems are, well, within the prohibition zone, the northern, the 3 northern, they've applied for right-of-way access, and then the ones along down by West Park there, the 3 that are down there, and they just haven't, they're going to put them in the right-of-way, so they just haven't got that license agreement finalized with the city. It's in, as I understand it, it's within the city's review. They're reviewing it now. The 2 I'm talking about, Roger, are in the western area. They are just right there right there where your pointers are. Those 2 locations are the 2 locations that they are having trouble acquiring private property access there. And so they are working on that. We may get in, start discussing with them what are some other options if they cannot get access exactly. Like I said, maybe slightly moving the locations to, but that's the 2 that they have identified that they are having some problems with access.
And those are important because this is the KFC site right here.
Right. Elizabeth Road is right up to
Elizabeth
Roger.
Road is already
right there.
Someplace.
So yes, they are, and then you go north of where your arrow is. That's up, starting up on Waverly. That's up where where Scio Township has sampled and hit very low concentrations of dioxane to the north there. So yes, we think they are. Important locations. Again, it's being, it's what happens in the real world when trying to acquire access from private property owners. A business, I believe one of, the movie theater or movie market there is one of the properties. I don't have the names of the private property owners, but again, it's businesses or companies that own that property. So those properties.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other part of that was we don't have the data for the Northwest Supply Well in the database because that's being, I'm speculated that's being withheld because the city's settlement with Gelman, when the city tried to intervene in the court case back in 2006 and lost, the settlement was anything related to Gelman, the city has to share with Gelman, and Gelman will share what it knows with the city, but the city can't make that public except through FOIA because Gelman doesn't want it public. Well, it turns out what we've known about that data is it's the same data we already get public. So the fact that the lawyers allowed that clause to get in there in the settlement is pretty curious. But as part of that, I think it's that the city has not been sharing its sampling with the state to put it in the Gelman database. And that's a little troubling. It would be like Scio doing sampling and not sharing with the state. That's what it's tantamount to. And it seems to me that any water sources that have dioxane in it, because we all share the same water sources, eventually it's all the same water. The water doesn't respect jurisdiction boundaries or anything. That if there's dioxane in our waters of the state, that should, in this area, it should be part of the Gelman database. And so that hasn't happened. And I will speak to some other instances of this in my segment coming up. If we don't have the data about the dioxane in the water, it's really hard to craft solutions. We don't have the full set of data. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you, Roger. James? You're mute. Oh, there you go.
Sorry about that. Just so we're clear, we're talking about the 2021 work order as opposed to a consent judgment, correct?
Well, what I was talking about is what I'm going to call the response activity order, which is the order that the judge did in June 2021, requiring Gelman to implement the investigation, implement the activities identified in the proposed fourth amended CJ document. That document was not approved by stakeholders, was not approved. It's the draft or proposed, but he took that document and said to Gelman, in his order, you implement what's identified in this order, in this document.
All righty, thank you. I just want to be clear. Thank you.
Okay, put your hand down, James. And I see no other hands, so I'm going to turn back to Dan and note that I did interrupt you. Did you have any further updates?
No, I don't think so. Again, I anticipate once that access agreement with the city, a license agreement, that they will move, their intent is to move quickly. They moved very quickly in the western area when they had the access, and once they got the rig out there, they were able to move from one location to another. So with these 6 locations, the 7th they already have access. So I anticipate that they will move, mobilize and stay out there to get the remaining monitoring wells installed in the eastern area.
Thank you. So the next item is about the Water Resources Division and the NPDES update. Is there anyone here that can speak on that?
Well, I can speak on the update of, there's 2 issues here, I think, that you have in this B. One of them is the NPDES renewal that has been going on for several years. Again, it has been submitted by Gelman into Water Resources. I don't have any new information on the status of that. I also want to identify that, I've identified that, people have concerns and would like, have invited Water Resources to come to CARD meetings. We have a Zoom meeting now, so I have made that invite known to Water Resources, but I do not have any information on the renewal. And as I've stated in the past, so all the documents, the required documents are in place, have been submitted. So Gelman is allowed, or the old permit, old permit, those requirements of the old permit are still currently being used to discharge under the NPDES permit. So the other NPDES related issue is the First Sister Lake. In the response activity order for the Park Lake area extraction well, which is an area where a second extraction well is proposed, the first step of installation is submitting a NPDES permit request to allow treated groundwater to be discharged to First Sister Lake. I do not have, that permit request has not been submitted by Gelman, so there is not a permit, a review process going on yet for that. So again, the Park Lake extraction well in that area, the first requirement is to submit the NPDES permit request. If that permit request is denied, then they will not, they aren't required to install an extraction well in that area.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ralph. You're mute.
We had a discussion about this at a previous meeting, and I'll repeat the gist of that here. I think I asked the question in a pretty blunt way the last time about when are you gonna, you EGLE, going to push this one way or the other, because it seems to me that the way that I remember the conversation the last time, I asked this question, when are you going to push that to conclusion? And the answer was, well, Gelman doesn't have to, they can wait on doing this, and we can't force them, which means to me that means pretty much everything in this order that we've been operating under for however many years means that they don't really have to do anything under this order ever, because this is something that they're supposed to do. And your answer, if I recall, was, well, there's no dates in the order. Well, there's no dates in the order to do any of this stuff. So if you follow that to its logical conclusion, Gelman has to do nothing under this order ever. That's an absurd conclusion, but that's the conclusion that you have to draw if you're applying the rules of logic to what you were saying about this permit right now. And if you can explain it away some other way, please let me know, because this means if you take the position that Gelman never has to apply for this permit and we never have to get this issue decided, that would be true of every single thing under this order. Maybe you ought to ask the Michigan Supreme Court that. It's ludicrous on its face. So maybe you need to ask Mr. Nagel about that, but it seems that he and his colleagues never show up at these meetings anymore. So we never get to ask these questions from anyone who can ever give an answer. And I'm curious whether that's deliberate.
Well, they do show up at the quarterly meetings.
Okay, good. We'll ask in June.
And I will point your question out to Brian and the other, our Gelman team. What I was saying specifically is there is no date for submittal identified in the response activity order specifically for the.
And that's true with every single thing that's in that order.
No, that you're wrong, Ralph.
Okay.
There are dates in there of when they have to have work plans. There are specific for other activities that are identified. Specifically, this NPDES permit, there is not a date saying by this date or within so many days of signing of the order or whatever, that there's not a specific date for the.
Then let me ask one follow-up question. Does that mean that for the items that don't have dates, you can push them off into the ether and they never have to happen at all?
I can't answer that, Ralph. I mean,
somebody has to. That's where we are.
Well, Ralph, but they are also putting in monitoring wells, which I want to get that new information related to the geology, the hydraulics, and the analytical results of the plume related to 7.2. So they aren't stopping everything. So
I didn't say
whether whether a decision is made to request or what that process is, I don't know right now. I just don't know what that process would be.
Let me put it in the most polite. And again, I don't really want to just throw this at you because this is all Attorney General stuff, but you're the only person here. Then you have to relay the request. You have to.
I understand. I mean, I don't take it. So, I understand your frustration.
The point is, this was the biggest issue and created a giant public firestorm. And all we get is in every meeting that this is talked about, it's like, well, we don't know anything and they don't have to do anything. There's no date specified. And having this hang over everyone's head essentially forever is excruciating to everybody here other than maybe EGLE. And it really shouldn't be allowed to continue in this kind of limbo. That's just not acceptable. So I'll leave it at that.
So
I will talk with Brian.
note, excuse me, Dan, I would note that the polluter knows that this was something that generated a lot of pushback. And so because if they don't get the permit, they don't have to do the work. They don't have to spend the money to do that work. That's got to be attractive to the polluter to know that we don't want it. If they don't do it, they don't have to spend the money. On the other hand, as Dan has pointed out, they are proceeding on other points in the work order or in the court's order. And so I really do think that we need to draw that distinction between the things that we don't want them to do that they're not doing and the things that are in the order that we don't object to that they are doing. Go ahead, Vince.
Oh, we've discussed this in the past, that they actually have an option besides dumping it in our pristine lake, one of the few we have in Ann Arbor and in the region, actually, that's, you know, as clean as it is. They could run a pipe to the treatment plant. They don't want to do that because it's too expensive, is my impression. And EGLE is not willing to pressure them to do it, in my opinion. Those are my opinion.
EGLE can't do anything that isn't in that order.
But they have to clean up that, well, if they can do it, they should be required to do it. And one way to do it is to put a pipe in. And I'm sure Roger's going to chime in here. And that pipe is very expensive. And I don't think they want.
The fundamental flaw in that argument is that the state can't compel them to do anything that's not in their order.
I thought they had an order to clean it up.
And the fundamental problem with the consent judgment, the reason I was opposed to the consent judgment was because they wanted to do this rather than that. And so you can't make them do something that's outside the order.
So the order has to have pipe written into it specifically?
The only
I don't know.
The only thing that they're required to do under the order is seek this permit. If they get the permit, dump it into the lake. There isn't an alternative in the order.
Oh.
On the other hand, once the appeal runs its course, we get to go back to the judge and continue to seek cleanup options that are not necessarily in this order. Go ahead, Ralph.
That's the last point that you made. I want to say essentially to chime in on that. I had a one-on-one conversation with Bill Stapleton, who represents Scio Township. And in that conversation, when I raised this point that, you know, this is a heads you win, tails we lose kind of thing, he said, oh, no. We can go back to the court when we get these quarterly reviews, which of course there have never been one, and they may never be one. So that's if it ever happens that they can go and ask the judge for that query, will they go and ask for that? I wouldn't bet my house on that one. But that would be the thing to do, would be to go to ask for a modification of the order to compel them to use an alternative means of transporting the effluent. But will that ever happen? I'd say the odds of that are pretty low, given unless the EPA shows up.
I don't try to see the future, but I agree with you.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Well, I know Roger's next, but if I could just clarify that they're actually, if you read the NPDES permitting, and maybe Patti knows more on this too, but it specifically says there are not, I mean, maybe the court order trumps what the NPDES permit request says, but there is a third option. If there's an alternative method of disposal, or I don't know the exact words because I don't have it in front of me, but it's like there's some wording in there as to that effect too. That
okay, thank you. Go ahead, Roger. You're mute.
Just so other people know what we're talking about this area here with high concentrations that escaped without being detected for years. I'm going to turn off the 3D part of it so we can look and see where that is. It's this purple area here, which is around roughly the same concentration that made it up to DuPont Circle. We don't know if this is the same offshoot or a separate offshoot. We don't know how dioxin got up here. But we do know it's not showing on this because this data only goes through 2020. But IW1 here is now contaminated more than 1 part per billion. So we're already seeing either eastward movement from this area or maybe northward movement across what was not supposed to be possible from dioxin down here. There's a lot of dioxin to be cleaned up here. One of the things that Gelman may do is use the existing pipeline, which is limited because of design flaws, to 200 gallons per minute, where they might use some of that capacity to take this untreated water back to the plant for treatment. The other possibility, of course, is they can have an on-site treatment system and do something else with the water other than put it into the first sister lake. And if they are allowed to dump 280 parts per billion into Allen Creek, they may revisit what they were not permitted to do by the city in the early days, which is to dump their partially treated water into Allen Creek drain. And of course, people don't want that because that ends up near their basements. Now, they got to do something with the water. And I don't think they're going to do what I once suggested to a Paul vice president, which is clean it up to non-detect, bottle it, spend money on marketing and sell it for 50 cents a liter and make $1 billion. I don't think they're going to do that. But, you know, if we let dioxin like this just go, where are we going to get water for our great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren? Because this could be going on anywhere else in Michigan, and you might not even be allowed to know about it. The fact that, again, we don't know all of the sampling that's going on. We don't have any of the well logs for any of these locations that have been installed. Is that right, Dan? We don't have any well logs for these monitoring.
No,
locations.
Roger, I received the well logs this week.
But you haven't shared them yet, right?
No, I have not shared them.
But you're going to share them as soon as you get them from now on, right?
We're going to put them into the database and I will share them as I've shared them in the past.
Yeah, the well log information, that's good. You put them in the database, but the well logs themselves that you get from.
Right. In the past, what they've been summarized in a report, and we've posted that report. I did receive, because it's taking so long because of some of the access problems, I requested that I receive the individual well logs, and I did receive those. So we'll talk about posting those on the web page.
Yeah, is there something we can do to help get those posted more quickly? I know there's sometimes when you ask something to get posted, it takes a while. Something we
no, not really. I need to, am I going to have a what's new portion? Because the posting, I have some discussion about the EGLE I might as well say it. EGLE is updating their the Gelman webpage. So they're going, they're updating all the web pages across the state to a state format. So there's going to be a little delay here of posting any new information as we move to the new platform, which Roger includes searchable table of all the documents that we have, like you've asked for in the past. So we are in the process. I've worked with in the last couple of weeks with giving, doing that with the web page person that I deal with. So that's we are going to go to a new format. Information will be posted, but there's going to be a little delay here as we move to the new platform.
All right.
As
I
soon
would
as
like
that's
to
up,
request-
I would,
I would
post
like to
informa-
request that we have a meeting with the website people before they release the final product. Any good website developer will contact the website users and find out what, if any, of the changes mean for the website users. You can't just speculate of what the website user is going to want. You should ask the users. We're the users. You should ask us what we
pay
want
for
in
it,
the
too.
website changes. I mean, it's just common sense. That's what you do to make a good product. If you want a good product, you have to talk to the users before you make the changes. Otherwise, then you have to spend more money changing it again to make it work. So please do that. Please insist that they talk to those of us at CARD who actually use the website. And some of us have decades of experience with website development. We might actually help you improve your product for free. So please pass that along.
Okay, Roger, I will.
All right. And so Dan, you did start what's new. Is there anything else that's new that you want to tell us about?
I just an update. There was Gelman that informed us of a shutdown of the system on March 30th and 31st for some routine maintenance. Basically, they had some were replacing fatigue pipes in their infrastructure and adding some inline monitoring ports in the pump room at the facility, treatment facility. So they were down for 2 days. They did as required, inform EGLE. And then when they were going down and informed when they started back up again. So that was really the other information that I had as far as that.
You know, we used to get alerts, emails about that when it happened. We don't get that anymore. That's something you could do. When you get an alert.
Well, Roger, I did not send out an alert since we got it last week. I was going to come to the CARD meeting and identify, hey, that they did this. So
well, but
some
the
of those
word alert is kind of has its own meaning. Alert is like, okay, this is urgent.
Right. And I don't consider this urgent because it's routine maintenance. It's like in this past year, each year they have to clean out the ponds. So they got to shut the system down. That's routine maintenance. It's not, for example, that something happened that would had a long-term effect on the treatment facility.
Yeah, but in the past, when there's been shutdowns, sometimes I went out and videoed or took photos of what the effects were so that we could see, for instance, what the normal flow of the tributary would be during shutdown. That's because I knew that they were shut down. I can't do that now because the shutdown has already happened and restored. So there was an opportunity there that maybe we could have done some sampling at low flow conditions to see how fast the tributary resumes. Just because you don't think it's important doesn't mean that we don't think it's important. Do you understand why I'm saying that?
Yes,
we look at things that you guys don't look at. So we need to know when there's shutdowns. Thanks.
Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to the chair for Roger's updates. Go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, let me get my screens. Like I said earlier, I could really use a third monitor if anybody has a free one sitting around. Then I'll really overwhelm my system, right? So I'm gonna move my Zoom thing over here and switch to a different view. Let's see which view it is here. We could almost use like a technical director to do some of what I do here in the hosting, but I know we're not going to be able to afford that. It would have to be somebody who's good at it and doesn't cost any money. Oh, Eric, thanks. You have a monitor? Okay, the other thing I need, Eric, is I need space to put the monitor. All right, let me go back to where I was here. Let's do a new share. And I think I have this up somewhere. Bear with me here, I've got limited screen space. So I'll stop the share and then minimize this and then go to the view that I wanted. Getting there. Yeah, here it is. So let me share this. There we go. Share screen. And it's this one. There, finally. Sorry about that. Taking so long. All right, so this is my new way of kind of summarizing my notes. I just want to point out to start with that this month, April 2022, marks 5 years since Gelman, Paul Danaher did sampling in the marshy area here. And CARD and the public has not seen the data from that sampling 5 years later. We know it's there because I had this image from Google Earth, historical image that shows what would look like roads there. And it turns out they were truck mats. We covered that in one previous CARD meeting. We knew something was going on. We didn't know what. But now, even though there's a confidentiality agreement, we happen to know where because of EGLE's Rockworks modeling, which showed us where these samples were. You know, that was 4 years later, but we know where they are. We just don't know how deep these samples are, what the dioxane readings were from those. We're again in the dark about what dioxane is left here. And yet the judge's order was based on some negotiations by the lawyers and some consultants that supposedly use this data, but we haven't seen the data to know whether that's a good settlement. That proposed settlement was worthwhile. It's been 5 years. Now, it turns out that's nothing new. Some of the data is still being ignored, including Gelman's own supply wells that they used for production and for drinking water back in the early days. We're talking about 30 years later. There's data that's not in the database, and it's there on paper somewhere if you know where to look. But there were double and triple digit parts per billion in Gelman's own supply wells back in the early days. And that data is not in the database. And those wells, it turns out, were in the E unit at the same time that Gelman told everybody, don't worry, there's a laterally extensive clay layer protecting that E unit from any dioxin we happen to be discharging. When their own sampling of their own supply wells showed that that wasn't true. Now, there's people along the way don't want to share that information because it kind of shows that different people have dropped the ball along the way. But I want people to know that that is what we know. We know that there was dioxin in their supply wells. We have their reports on paper. It's just not in the database. We don't have a way to sample those Gelman supply wells anymore because they were plugged recently without, as far as we know, any final sampling of dioxin from those wells. So they had E unit wells on their site that they plugged without finally sampling them. So we're left with fewer sampling locations on their site for these deeper locations. We don't know how much dioxin is left in that layer because I don't have the wells there. Those 4 of those 5 wells got plugged. The 5th well is still active. It's called the Firewell. It's what apparently provides the water for the water tower. That one may not be as deep as the other. But I just want people to know that the suppression of data for this site isn't just within the last 5 years. It's been happening for 30 plus years. And it's time to stop that. It's time to get all the data out, get it in a standard unified database, and let, when even apparently even the EPA can't get this done. And they're going to be the ones that have to evaluate whether this site is worthy of being a Superfund site. And if they don't have the data, what's going to happen? As Ralph would say, I try not to swear, but this is not the way you protect our water supplies, by hiding the data. I'm going to go on my next screen here. I've mashed up Google Earth for many years, and just the last couple of years, I also started using Tableau Public that's free, which lets you do some amazing graphics with large amounts of data. And so one of them I have, and I think I can switch now to my Google Earth mashup. Move my screen over here and turn off a few layers. We don't need all the well layers on. So let me turn those off. And back this up a little bit. So I took the Tableau Public.
Roger, we're not seeing the Google Earth.
You will see it in a second.
Oh, okay.
I gotta reshare it. Thanks for pointing that out. I probably would have forgot. New share. Share Google Earth. There we go. Now you should be seeing it. Yes.
Yep, we see it.
You see Google Earth now? So what I did here is I took this Tableau Public graph, and what we have here are the surface elevations, these dark triangles. And also on this same graph are the static water levels for each of those monitoring wells that do static water level sampling. So you can see in some places, this is really where the water table is. This is the level of the water. So as you get closer to the river, of course, the level goes down, and the surface layer goes down close to the water layer too. So like in this area here, which would west to east, that would correspond to this area that we're worried about it near West Park. The water table is very close to the surface. So if there's dioxin in the water at this shallow area, it would be very close to the surface. So here's another layer that I can overlay on that. These are the dioxin hits as of I think this is probably 2019 or 2020, 2019 on this one, yeah. So the size of the bubble and the location, the size of the bubble is the dioxane concentration. The bigger the bubble, the more dioxane. The location of the center of each circle, each donut, is the bottom of the screen elevation that was being sampled. So for instance, if I zoom in here at the core, Gelman property, we have some really high concentrations still. A lot of these are in the marshy area or just nearby in this bubble here. But you can see what's happened over the years is that this dioxane has made its way down to different layers going to the west, in some cases to different layers. Now, again, we're looking laterally through a cross section of this area. So some of these wells are farther north, some of them might be farther south, but west to east, this is what the cross section looks like. What I don't have on here is the bedrock layer, you know, where the water can't get through the shale layer that supposedly protects underlying you know, these are the areas of water aquifers that are used in all of this area of Michigan to this depth. So we get 200 or 300 feet deep here. We still have dioxane. In fact, it's hard to find any layers that don't have dioxane except where they didn't sample, like in here. So how did these high concentrations get here? Well, it looks like they went this way. But how the high concentrations over here, how did these get over here? Well, they probably just didn't have the right sampling at the right time. So this is a west to east display. It joins up the two visualizations that I've been using to kind of inform people and hopefully decision makers of what's going on under the ground. This is the only reason we have this is because we have the data. We have the data so we can do graphs like this. And of course, I did this for south to north as well. So you can see the same things. You got the surface elevation, the static water level, water table elevation. And then underneath that, you have where the dioxane is. And you can see from south to north, high levels of dioxane got down to these deeper layers without a lot of sampling to show how it got there. So if you ever see a cross section that shows, well, there's just a little thin layer of dioxane in the water in the aquifers, that's not true. There's aquitards, areas where water can't easily penetrate throughout this whole area. And it's probably more than just a couple, three, maybe 2 or 3 major ones, but there's all these minor ones. So how dioxane gets down to these layers is because dioxane goes where water goes. If there's pumping in that direction, the water is going to go in that direction. Dioxane is going to go with it. So this is a better representation because this is actual data. This is real data. This is a better representation of where the dioxane is. It turns out with Tableau Public, we can look at this over the years. I haven't loaded those onto Google Earth yet, but if you go to the Tableau Public section of srsw.org, you can see those for yourself and play the south to north, west to east, whichever version you want, and watch these bubbles change over time. So you can kind of get a visualization of where the dioxane has been, where it's going over time. That's what we can do with data. Let me go back to my other. Do a New share here, get back to my diagram. Yeah. Let me share it. All right, let me figure out what's going on here. I stop my share and start over, I guess would be the easiest way. New share. Share. There we go. All right, so no, that's Google Earth. Or is it? Let's see. Are you seeing my cursor move around? You see my cursor move around?
Yes,
Yep,
yes,
I
we
do.
do.
Okay,
Thanks.
good. All right, so this is what I just went through. I went through these 3 visualizations, 4 visualizations here. Let's see what else I have. Well, the other thing I've been working on is updating the Google Earth mashups. And soon after I do that, I would do the Tableau public visualization. So this is my flow chart of what I do to do that. So we have these different sources of data that are going to feed into the Google Earth mashups. They include 2021 data and Tableau public for the same thing. So right now we have 2 different databases from EGLE. We have the EGLE database for 2020, 2021, which include a well table and a data table. I've already got those converted. I finally was able to get the Rockworks data exported by exporting the KML file that was available at that site and parsing that and combining those 2. So instead of from one database, I have to combine 2 databases. And I've also got a dotted line here in preparation for incorporating Scio Township's data. And way back up here, I've got a placeholder for when we get the secret sampling data released that's been secret for 5 years. All of that will eventually be incorporated into the combined database, which I use to do the Google Earth mashups in the Tableau public. So that's taken a lot of work. There's a lot of errors in the database. A lot of them got corrected, Dan, but there's still a few that are should have been caught by the Rockworks team and fixed. But that's not the whole thing. These are the other layers that I have available on Google Earth. These red things are the ones I just talked about, and the wells, these different sampling sources. Ann Arbor Township had some 522 sampling. Scio's got theirs that's going to get in. University of Michigan has some of its own sampling that should be included. And of course, the one that I mentioned earlier about Ann Arbor City, they have their own sampling from the Northwest Supply Well and from the bromate sampling in the river. But there's all these other, some of these are static layers, some of them are layers that I got from other sources that better inform any user of Google Earth of what's related to this issue. For instance, the well prohibition zones are available on the EGLE website. We have the Gelman plume maps themselves that I hand trace every year because we can't get them to export the shape layers. So all these other things, sometimes if they're annual things, I have to update them, but those will all get fed into the 2022 Google Earth mashups. That they've already been fed into the prior year's one, and they're going to be into 2021 now that we have the 2021 data. So that's about it. We're still, like I said, they're still missing some Rockworks layers, and I've made some changes too to get ready to incorporate the Scio and any other residential sampling that's going to take place. Because when you start doing a residential sampling, you can't just put the address in any willy-nilly format. You should use the standard post office designations for the address so that you can compare apples and apples and not have, for instance, it shouldn't say 511 North Wagner. The official way is 511 N Wagner Road. And same for some of the things that Rockworks used. They called it West Park 73 when all the prior designations for that were MW 73, even though it's not a real monitoring well, that was the designation for it. So I have a way now to keep the original designation, but have a standard designation that we use for sharing the information. And that'll facilitate getting all these other homeowner samples and other kinds of new samples in. We still want to talk to the Rockworks team, Dan, about these kind of practices, best practices for designating new sample locations, especially when there's no address involved. When you sample a certain part of the tributary, what's the best way to sample those so that you don't come up with a different set of designations every time you do a one-time sample? You remember that one of Gelman's consultants tried to consolidate some of the tributary samples from various times, and they ended up with 4 or 5 names for the same location because nobody had come up with a standard designation before that. In this next, before the EPA comes in and takes over, EGLE ought to do the EPA a favor and consolidate to have a standard designation for sample locations. So you can compare what happened 10 years ago with what's happened 5 years ago and into the future without having to spend all the time that I've had to spend to match up all these random designations for locations. There should be some standards for that. Anybody have any questions before I go on?
We are running a little close to the end of the meeting. You have about 8 minutes.
I think I'm done, but let me go back to the agenda here. Oh man, I have to stop the share in order to see my screen enough to know where this thing is. Just have to clear off more space and get that third monitor, I guess. So this is the agenda. Let me share it. Is this it? I think this is it. It'll do. There we go. So I should be back. You should be seeing the agenda again. All right, that was the technical meetings. There was an issue recently about some new research that showed you can find dioxane from surface water tributaries by looking at these little galls that form on certain kind of plants. And Wayne State did that for this site and found dioxane in a percentage of the sample locations. And they looked at naturally occurring grapevines that had these little galls, and they found dioxane in the galls, which is a form of phytoremediation. The plants are taking up the dioxane, and then in this case, they were storing it so that they could actually sample that without having to, it was like passive sampling. Now that's the kind of thing that we could cover in a technical meeting. It's not appropriate, I think, for this group, because it's, gets a little bit into the weeds, literally, when you're talking about taking galls off of weeds. But those are the kind of things that should be researched from this site. We have the nation's largest, and not the world's largest, dioxane type of its type right here in this in this area with world-class universities nearby. And it's good that one of them is actually doing something. The problem is I can't read the report because it's behind a paywall. And I'm not ready to pay for just finding out where these, I'd like to know where those locations were. You know, like, were they near my house? Were they out here? Out the window? Or were they, you know, somewhere upstream? But apparently they did this along Honey Creek and some of the tributaries. And it was really interesting to know that because this was paid for by public money.
Well, some of us may be able to get that data or get that
Yeah.
report for
And
free.
that's the kind of thing we can cover in a technical meeting, which is why I'm still thinking that we should revive that. And talking about the subcommittee for the CARD website update, I think this relates as much to the CARD website or the EGLE's website as the CARD website, because there's things on the CARD website that we could defer to EGLE's website if it was any good. You know, and we wouldn't have to spend the time to try to keep it up to date. We'd rely on the EGLE that supposedly has the sole source information for that to keep that up to date. And that's why it's important that we have people that actually use the websites to have their input into EGLE for EGLE's website. And so it's good to know that EGLE is doing something about it. We would like to have some voice into how that's done and give us and give our wish list for what should be on the website and things that give us problems now. Hopefully those get fixed. So I think that's it. Any questions?
Hey, Roger, I would just like to say again that there may be ways to get this stuff that's behind a paywall through people who are at the university or access.
That's why I sent the letter, the email.
Okay, yeah, I just brought up the page here on the Wayne State page, so we'll look into maybe see them.
Yeah,
we can get that.
Yeah, and this just came, and so I haven't had a chance to follow up on it much. But I keep I have a tweet deck that gives me Twitter feeds on certain topics, and that's where I found it first. I'd like to talk to the researcher who posted that. You know,
yeah, they'll send it to you, or we can download it.
Because this is the only way we're going to get this solved is if we have good collaboration. I mean, think of what would be happening if we didn't have CARD looking at this every month. Think of all the expert backgrounds we have on the screen here. If we can't solve a problem like this, there's no hope for anybody else. We are an empowered community here. We should be able to solve these kind of problems. We are problem solvers. That's what we do here in Michigan. And we're stewards to 20% of the world's fresh surface water. We need to do a better job. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for everybody for coming.
All righty then. Moving on to the next item. Does anyone have a non-agenda item? We have 3 minutes for that. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I just have a couple questions. Has there been a city, I appreciate, of course, Kathy, and I think before her, there was Jeff Hayner was sitting on CARD. But has there been a city representative since Matt Nod left that is a technical representative from any agency of the city?
I believe that the city has designated Patti McCall as their representative to this body.
Oh, okay, thank you.
We used to have Brian Stiglitz for a while.
Okay. I didn't realize
He got dumped on with the task that everything that Matt did got dumped into Brian's bailiwick. And
so is Patti the person to ask about why the city data is not being released on the city wells?
I don't know that information, but I can ask.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to ask the city lawyer. I think they're the ones that know most.
You could put that in through a council member, like Elizabeth or Kathy could
Right.
just simply ask the administrator what it would take to get, so perhaps Roger would write down a rather exacting list of what he would like from the city, and they could take it forward and see what it would take to get it.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, I think you can just say, give us all the data about wells that have dioxane.
Well, you can get that just simply by filing the FOIA request that the settlement with Gelman requires them to receive before they can release anything.
Yeah, but that was for the data that Gelman gave to the city.
Yeah.
I don't know if that covers, that's something else. The city's own data, you'd have to, somebody in the city can do that. I'd leave it up to somebody in the city limits to do that.
That's why I'm suggesting that a rather exacting description of what you're looking for would be appropriate. Go ahead, Kathy.
Yes, I'm volunteering to take it not only to the city administrator, but also to our new city attorney who will be starting on April 14th.
Yay, team.
All right, Vince, go ahead.
I would just like to reiterate something we've discussed before about when the city contracts out projects or takes on projects, that they contact CARD or come to CARD to try and get some guidance. It seems time and again, projects are set up and we don't hear about it until they're on and running. And it's, we have valuable information that we should be able to provide and make better use of those people's times and money, our money. So I appreciate if, city people and county would work with the CARD more often. Thanks.
All righty. Thank you. Go ahead, Jim.
I had a question just about the sewer system in Ann Arbor. A friend of mine's sewer in December backed up into their house. And is there any possibility of dioxane being in the sewer system?
Boy, that's a good question. I don't know.
Anybody?
I guess my first question, is it within the plume area?
Yes.
So go ahead, Patty.
Go ahead. I was just going to say it would be difficult to know that, right? I mean, there's you have to sample for it. It's in the stormwater in West Park. I mean, we do have some leaky pipes, but I would doubt it.
Well, the pipes do leak back and forth pretty routinely all through Ann Arbor. So we have crosstalk depending on the year. If it's part of the year, if it's very wet out, it goes one way. If it's very dry, it goes the other way. So there is a lot of crosstalk, as they call it, in these pipes. And so the pipe could have been contaminated from either the groundwater or the storm water that's carrying it through the pipe. And normally these pipes run pretty close together, just in Ann Arbor, at least. So there could be some crosstalk that could be a problem. Probably not super high concentration, but it's hard to know.
Okay.
I guess I had a question. Was it sanitary sewer or storm
Yeah, that's
sewer?
what my question was. Sanitary or
Storm.
Jim?
I'm not sure. It was the manhole cover in the middle of the street, which was blocked up, which caused it to go into the house.
Could be
So
either.
it came and
one.
like pumped
definitely-
that out, and then it was okay, and then the water flowed out of
It
the
would
house.
smell. If it was sanitary sewer, you would smell it.
There was an odor to it,
Oh,
so.
Okay.
Okay.
should be a strong odor.
So then the agenda has the next two meetings on it. Oh, I'm sorry. There's all kinds of hands up. Are you done, Vince? Put your hand down. You too, Jim. I thought Eric's hand was up too. Did you want to say something? Okay. So the next meeting is May 3rd, followed by our June 7th meeting. Thanks to everybody. And that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Good seeing everyone.
Thanks, Beth.
Thanks,
Likewise,
Beth.
Beth.
Welcome.
I agree. Good seeing everyone. Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone. Good meeting.
Well, now that the weather's getting nicer, maybe we can have a little subcommittee meeting at the session room.
Yeah,
I would like that a lot.
I
I
think
would like that a lot.
we used to do debriefings once in a while after meetings, and it's getting to be that point in the year we can maybe do that again.
Yes.
I'd like that. I'd like that a lot.
Let's do it.
Holmes Brewery in Ann Arbor, close to our house, has an outdoor area that has a fire pits. So you can-
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah,
it's pretty nice. It's not doesn't have an overhang, but if
that's
it's
great.
raining, not so great.
Let's plan something.
Amen.
Send that to
Okay.
the activities committee.
Yeah, that's right. The social committee.
The social.
There you go. I love it.
Oh, thanks, you guys.
All right. Thank you, Beth.
Take
Thank you.
care.
Thanks, Roger. Everybody. Good.